So I was on my way to the gym and I remember like I was actually like just stretching and I got the message and then I just WhatsApp called my co-founder and I was like, "Oh my God, like we sold our first baby. Like this is crazy." I mean, it truly feels like you're having like it's your baby and it felt nice to know that we built something that someone wanted, that it was of value, to feel like it got to an outcome, right? Like there's like a closure. I mean, there is a new beginning and a new chapter, but I think that felt really good. I'm Amita Goyal, the CEO and co-founder of Playback. I was actually born in India. I grew up right outside of New York City, and I started the company 3.5 years ago. So excited to have this conversation today with you. Well, I guess my first job was really at my dad's small business. He had a little shop in Jersey City. And so very early on, I got exposed to the world of retail and just like businesses. More professionally, though, I studied finance in college and I started working on Wall Street. That was my first job. I did that for about 5 years. And I always had this desire to build something on my own. I'd seen my dad do it, but also just I remember being in college and Facebook had just come out, and I was like, wow, this guy's like my age and he's starting a company. How cool. Like one day I want to do it. And so that was always like a seed that was planted in the back of my mind, but I didn't really start until much later on. I think there were just a lot of concerns and fears, and I think a lot of women often face this like imposter syndrome, like can I lead a company, can I be successful? And so I think I had a lot of fears when I was much younger, but after spending about 5 years in finance, I was like, I want to go to business school. I want to actually like deepen my understanding of the world. I wanted to have a little bit more of a global career, understand how businesses work and think. So went to INSEAD in 2013. And then I got an internship at BCG over the summer and joined them full time in New York in 2014. So I spent about the next 3.5 years at BCG. And that was a great learning experience because I got to like meet with Fortune 50, Fortune 500 CEOs, really got to understand strategically how they think about business problems. And I think consulting really hones you on like structured problem solving and effectively communicating, the messages to folks. So it was great. I had a really good experience. And then at some point I was like, okay, I'm in my 30s. Like if I don't do this now, when am I going to? I felt like I was financially ready. And I also felt like I talked to so many CEOs and I'd been meeting founders that I felt like if I didn't do it now, I would regret it for the rest of my life. And I didn't want to kind of live in those regrets. So decided to kind of explore different ideas, but didn't really have anything concrete. And then I got an opportunity from Wework. They just came along and it was 2019. I didn't know it at the time, but I was being hired basically for help with the IPO. So I was working directly with, Adam Newman's chief of staff and head of strategy and like that entire team. Did that for a little under a year. And then in 2020, decided to full-time pursue my dreams of becoming an entrepreneur. Again, what was really important to me in that decision was one, I wanted to have a co-founder, and two, I wanted to make sure that it was full-time and we were both dedicated. So I applied to an accelerator called Entrepreneur First. A friend of mine had done that before and he met his co-founder and he was on his way to Series A. And I was like, this is so cool. Like this could be a really good opportunity. So I decided to apply to Entrepreneur First in 2020, got accepted. And that's where I met my co-founder and the journey of Playback began.
Awesome. All right, let's get into that journey.
Yeah.
What did you set out to do with the company when you came into the accelerator, and how did that business model potentially change over the course of the accelerator, or did it?
Yeah, so actually the way the accelerator works is it's almost like dating. You get to see different technical co-founders that you connect with. I was on the business side, so they have business and technical. And actually my co-founder, he was the third person that I met, and it was like the third time was a charm. So what you do is like you basically explore interests, business ideas that you want to test out during the accelerator. And I think for me, what was really important was a couple of things. One, I wanted to make sure that my co-founder, like our values were aligned. So we wanted to build something really big, something impactful. I think the second thing was was just full-time commitment. I didn't want like half, working part-time, or like if it didn't work, then we'll go back to our jobs. Like I wanted it to be we're in for like the long run. And then I think the third thing was like complementary skill sets. So just really having someone where I know where I shine and my superpowers are really on the sales side, strategic thinking, just business, operations, finance. But while I understand product, I took a basic like computer science class. I could learn coding. That wasn't really my strength. So I think when I met my co-founder, I just kind of knew. We had our first conversation was he's based in Berlin. It was at 6 a.m. on a Friday morning, and we ended up talking till 6 p.m. And then we talked all weekend, and then we decided to work together. And we didn't have a clear idea. We knew that we were interested. Like I was very interested in empowering small businesses because I had seen that from my dad. He was experimenting in video technology and working with influencers. So we were just trying to figure out how we can potentially merge those two interests.
It's so interesting and a bit of a different twist on an accelerator. Most folks, or most accelerator programs rather, you come in with an idea and you're kind of testing and, reiterating on that idea. So that's an interesting approach.
Yeah. It was, I think at the end of the day, it's not really the idea, it's the person you're building it with and then how you're going about it. So it's really like for us, we talked to 30 to 50 brands. We had a lot of customer development calls. I think that's really important early on because a lot of times we have an idea, we think, oh, this is interesting. But at the end of the day, you have to solve a real problem. Like you want to make a difference. And the only way you'll know that, and, we've heard this a lot, talk to your customers, talk to your customers. Sometimes it's hard because you may have like an idea of, oh, I want to see this in the world. And maybe that's not what people want, or it's not needed. It's just a nice to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. So at what point in this process did you land on what ultimately ended up being Playback?
Yeah, so we actually had quite a few pivots. At the time when we first started, we were launching video shopping. So when we spoke to our brands, a lot of what we heard was, hey, it's really hard to get in front of our customers. This was during COVID. So it was at the height of COVID, pre-vaccines. It was like August 2020. And so what we started doing was we were developing like technology to put video shopping directly on websites. Our bigger vision was we wanted to create like a marketplace. So what we wanted to see was like a new way, like reimagining a new way to shop online. So how do you we wanted to empower small independent brands. They didn't have a lot of marketing budget. So how do we get influencers connected with these brands to create like short form videos that are shoppable? So almost like TikTok for shopping, which actually now TikTok has launched this year. So it's interesting to see that. But we pivoted into the marketplace. We started with the live shopping, pivoted into the marketplace once we got enough brands. And what we realized in that process was that to build a three-sided marketplace where you have lots of independent brands, a lot of influencers, a lot of customers, we had raised 500,000. So I don't think it was enough to build a three-sided marketplace. And we were first-time founders. I think it was overly ambitious because essentially I was living with my parents at the time. Their basement became like a logistics warehouse. I had all of these brands send us products there. I was going to the FedEx, UPS every day. I remember like within the first week of launch, we had a brand that had 180 orders. And I was like, it was a Saturday afternoon. I spent like 8 hours. My little sister was helping me. And my mom's like, you're crazy. You're at BCG making so much money. What are you doing here? But my parents are super supportive. But it was an interesting journey. So in that process, what we realized is that because we were doing logistics, because we were almost like an influencer agency managing that relationship, because we were also like, I was a founder building like on the sales strategy side, it was just a lot of different moving pieces. And we weren't growing as fast. And so, but in that process, what we learned is that the influencer and the brand workflow was quite broken. So there was a lot of back and forth that I was doing manually. And we actually designed a tool for that. And that's eventually what became like the Playback version of what we sold this past summer. So what we sold was an influencer management workflow tool that helps brands who work with influencers to manage that entire end-to-end process, everything from communicating with them to shipping samples to the contract management to just the content review and so on. That process was quite broken because what a lot of brands and influencers were using was email and text messaging and Dropbox and Google Drives, and it was all over the place. So that is the product that we actually ended up selling this past summer.
All right, so let's get into the sale of the company. Was the sale of the business on your mind as you were building it? Was that part of perhaps the education and the accelerator program?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm going to be honest, Felina, it was not. My dream was to build $1 billion company. I was like, I want to see more women of color, women in tech building $1 billion platforms. So I never came with the intention of wanting to sell, but I think the way the process, it just happened, right? Like it's like we weren't seeking it out, but what happened was I was part of this other startup community. And one of the founders in that community, she had posted about, I knew she was working on an influencer tool, and she had posted about hiring engineers and further building the product. And at that time, when we had a playback with the influencer workflow, I was like, well, maybe you can just license our technology. We have it here. And that was like a B2B approach that we were thinking for the product. So when I approached her and I was showing her like the back end and everything, they got super excited. And that's really when the acquisition like interest started. So they're like, "What? We don't want a white label. We just love what you're building. So could we potentially acquire you?" And I was like, "Oh, interesting." So that's really how it came about.
Okay, great. So when this person that offered to purchase your company, just kind of on the fly through the discussion, said
Yeah.
that, how did you feel? What was going through your mind?
Yeah. I mean, I think part of it is like it's like, wow, very unexpected, surprising. But part of it was like we were kind of reflecting back, like we want to build something really big, and this is a great opportunity. This influencer has a lot of reach, a lot of resources. This could be a great spot. We were actually thinking about adding, I know AI is a big word right now, but we were last year, at the end of last year, we were really thinking about how to add AI capabilities to the workflow. And as you know, AI engineers are expensive. And because funding was quite difficult last year in 2022, end of 2022, this was just a great opportunity to kind of marry like our future vision of the product and have like a platform and access to someone who's very well connected. So I thought, I mean, it was kind of scary too. It's like, how am I going to feel? Like I've just been working on my own with, obviously we had a few investors. Now this is going to be a bit different, but it's been a couple of months now since we've been working with the acquisition, and I think everyone still has that very startup agile mentality. So it's not a big company that's purchased us, so it's a bit different.
Awesome, awesome. And from that day and that just conversation you had and that offer, what did the timeline look like? Was your partner with you during that conversation? If not, obviously going back to your partner and saying, "Hey, here's what happened," right? Talk me through those conversations and then the timeline.
Yeah, so we actually started the conversation in April when I saw that message and I reached out. So end of April was like the initial conversation, and we ended up closing mid-August. So it was about a 4-month process. Initially, when I reached out to my co-founder to tell him this, because I was like, oh, there could be a potential like white label solution. We can do this for a lot of different brands. Um, I think he was kind of surprised, but also like he felt excited too, because I think we both wanted to build like this product incorporating certain AI elements. I think we went back and forth. Like at one point, I was like, should we not? Like there was a little bit of like doubt and uncertainty, but what we did every time I make a decision, I really like to just like write it out. I think just thinking about it in my head is so hard. So I just put out an Excel spreadsheet and I'm like, okay, what are the pros? What are the cons? What's the longer term vision? And I think for us, like it made sense financially, and it made sense for where we wanted to see this product and what we wanted to do down the line. So it wasn't that hard to convince my co-founder. And again, I think this all goes back to the beginning, which is, I had 3 different potential co-founders that I was meeting through the accelerator. What really mattered to me was the number one thing was, are our values aligned, right? Can we do we both see, like, do you value the same things for the future? And I think that's what made the conversation with my co-founder a lot easier too.
And as far as coming up with the terms of the deal, how this would work, a lot of times, the acquiring company wants you to stay on because you're, part of the technology and part of the fabric of the company. How did
Yeah.
those conversations go with the buyer? Was that an easy process or were there any hiccups?
Yeah, no, I think that was it was a lot of back and forth. So the first part of that process was like just the negotiation of the offer, like just the pure finances of it, right? So how much equity, how much cash. There was I mean, I'm Indian, I'm a pretty good negotiator. Even they said that at the end, but we went back and forth a lot. I'm like, no, this is like, so I think in your mind, you kind of have to have a number that you think is fair and reasonable and valuable. And I think you just kind of go into it explaining the rationale for that, right? So I think there was a lot of back and forth that was going on between like equity and that the actual like the cash value, if you will, in terms of how much we would get compensated. And I think at the end of the day, you just have to like show the trade-offs and like the value that you're bringing and how much that is like if they were to not go with this deal and do something else, right? And so there was, I would say, like probably a month and a half of going back and forth on negotiating. And then once the negotiations were done, it was more about like initially we were like, okay, does my co-founder stay on? Do I stay on? Do both of us stay on? So that conversation also was going back and forth. And I think we both worked really well as a team. So even the company who acquired us was really interested in keeping the team as well as like all of our engineers and staff. So the what we ended up deciding was, okay, like we can do this. And but what I wanted to do was also like have time to build potentially something else. So I had very clearly negotiated that, hey, we'll work on this and we will commit to this. But this is going to be like not 100% full time. And they were comfortable with that.
And how did your investors react?
Yeah, so I think the investors were I mean, they were happy because, they were like, they saw like the synergies and the value as like the combined company. Um, I think initially, even with like the equity, our investor was like, well, this, he also was like, this is kind of small. And so I knew that from the get-go. But I think that they were really supportive. And I think that's really important too, right? Not creating a lot of bottlenecks, at least on our end. We didn't have a lot of back and forth. We had the accelerator, we had one major investor and then one minor investor. So our cap table was also not that big. And I did that intentionally, right? I didn't want to have a lot of people, especially as a first time founder. I just didn't know. So I think just having two stakeholders really to talk to made it a lot easier as well.
What did it feel like the next day after everything was done and finished and signed and everybody was settled? What was that feeling when you woke up the next day?
So I was on my way to the gym and I remember like I was actually like just stretching and I got the message and then I just WhatsApp called my co-founder and I was like, "Oh my God, like we sold our first baby. Like this is crazy." I mean, it truly feels like you're having like it's your baby and it felt nice to know that we built something that someone wanted, that it was of value, to feel like it got to an outcome, right? Like there's like a closure. I mean, there was a new beginning and a new chapter, but I think that felt really good. So yeah, I just remember smiling. I was doing a downward dog on WhatsApp with my co-founder when I got the message, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, like this is done. We did it. Like we did something." And like this isn't the end of our journey. I think with this company, we want to take it to a new height, and with what we're working on as well on the side, we want to continue to build. So this is just a stepping stone. I feel like it's like the first step in the mountain that we're reaching towards.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, I so appreciate you sharing your story with us and sharing your experience.
I love that you're doing this for female founders because it is it's just nice to hear different stories. So I love it.